Hey everybody, welcome back to today's video. Happy Friday to all of you guys watching. If you guys are new to the channel, I am Tanner Holmes and I race Outlaw karts and sprint cars all over the West Coast, and I truly get to live my dream, and that is race cars every single weekend. Now also, I document it and put it all on my YouTube channel, and you guys get to ride along with me. So obviously we're closing up on the end of this year, less than 15 days away, and I was scrolling through Twitter a few days ago when I realized something. Someone had sent out a tweet talking about how it's actually really sad because we're coming up on the end of a decade, and I didn't really think about it that way. I was just thinking new year, and then I put it all together, and obviously the beginning of 2010 to the end of 2019 will be the end of the decade. That'll be 10 years. And how much has really happened during that time period. And not necessarily just in racing, but just everything that's going on in our world. And for example, at the beginning of this decade, I was 6 years old and I was just getting started in racing. I was still playing with all my toys and I was just a little guy. And now to really where it's transitioned to 10 years later. So in today's video, we're gonna kind of use that theme and the theme that we have at the Red Bluff Outlaws this year, how it's our 10th consecutive year running full-time, never missing a race at the facility and at the famous track. Now, if you guys remember, I made a special t-shirt just for this whole season, and obviously because we got some really cool race cars, that helped too, and we got that on the t-shirt. But if you look at it, there's so much history, and that's kind of what we're gonna be going over in this video, because I'm gonna be showing every race car that I have ran this decade, which is pretty much all my race cars. Now, to any viewer watching this video, I think this should be pretty entertaining because I haven't showed a lot of the paint schemes I've ran in previous vlogs besides the ones when I actually was vlogging dating back to 2016. So that leaves 6 years of just unknown. So we're gonna get into that. I'm gonna scoot over and we'll get into our first paint scheme. So we gotta go all the way back to 2010, my first race at the Red Bluff Outlaws. The car that I brought was the white and dark green 18T. This was in the beginner box stock division and I was brand new to this facility. I didn't know anything about the place. Now this car was a QRC. I'm repping my new QRC hoodie for this video. Absolutely love this thing. But it was a QRC, and the reason for the color combo of dark green and white and then a little bit of red is because that's the colors of my parents' business, Johnny Cat. They do a little bit of construction and then a lot of trucking and hauling rock and all that good stuff. So we ran that car for a little bit and then we moved on, and a lot of these paint schemes are kind of not replicas, but they're duplicates of my favorite NASCAR driver, Kyle Busch, and a lot of the paint schemes he had, and then maybe we put a little bit of our own twist on it. So moving on to the second car that I ran was the Double Mint Camry, but instead of Double Mint, it was Johnny Cat. This was our car. Now, obviously, this car was modeled after Kyle Busch's Double Mint Camry number 18, and I really liked this car. I ran it my second year in beginner box at Red Bluff, which was 2011-2012 season, and then we also ran it in our first year of box stock. Now, a significant accomplishment that we had in this thing was we won the Red Bluff Outlaw Championship our first year in the class. Let me show you the trophy. Pretty cool. This is the eagle that they still give out if you win a championship at Red Bluff. Love this thing, I cherish it, and you always see it right back there in my videos. So after our first year in beginner box, we ended up getting another paint scheme for our second year, and this was the lime green 18T machine. Now this wasn't modeled after any Kyle Busch paint scheme. It was just a car that we actually saw at our local fair. We took some pictures of it. It was a truck. And we just literally took that design, put it in lime green because green is my favorite color, and we slapped it on the race car. Now, unfortunately, this year we did not win the championship. We ran second in points behind my buddy Carson Perkins, but we did win the West Coast Nationals, so that's a significant accomplishment that we had under this scheme. So now we're making the transition from the box stock class to the 250 class, and this is where we had many more paint schemes. I don't know what it was about 250, but my dad must have just wanted to design a new car, it seemed like every week. So our first one, we actually didn't design this one. It was unique, and it was a really cool looking car. This was the black, white, and blue car for 250, the first one we ever ran. Now, it was a unique paint scheme because it was actually a memorial car for one of the photographers at Red Bluff named Jack Waterman. He passed many years ago, I believe at the beginning of the decade, and it was made as a car to honor him, and we ended up purchasing it from someone who had only ran a few laps on it. Now, it was a little bit of an older motor. It was a fairly newer car that just had a decent amount of laps on it, something to get me started, and we really enjoyed running it for a year or two. And now is when we get into many more 250 paint schemes. So that I ran a few races at Red Bluff, and then we got started into my first full year in 250, and I started out with another lime green car. Check out this factory QRC lime green car. It was really, really cool. I won my first race out in it, the first and second points race of the season. And we had tons and tons of speed with it, and for some reason, we ended up getting another paint scheme just a short time later during that year, and it was pretty much the same paint scheme just in black. This also had the factory QRC logo on the side of it, as well as our many other sponsors we had at the time, and both of them I had a lot of success with. I believe the first year kind of switching off between one or the other each weekend, we won 5 races. We also ran second in the points standings, won Rookie of the Year, and it was fun. I did tear 1 or 2 of them up maybe here or there, and that didn't really help, but we still had a pretty good year with them. So that's probably a little bit confusing and hard to follow, but to give you some context, that was my first full year running Red Bluff in the 250 class. That was 2014-2015 season. At the end of that season, I decided to get another car because we had got some support from KTM. They are the people who build our engines. They are a huge company for dirt bikes. If you guys are familiar with anything on dirt bikes, you know what KTM is. We have our local dealer here, OMA KTM. They still support my racing. All the guys down there, Jeff and everyone, are super, super cool. We decided to do a KTM car that was modeled after Ryan Dungey's car when he ran an Outlaw kart. Now, Ryan Dungey had only ran that kart a few times, but since we were getting some support from KTM, we thought it'd be cool to do a whole wrap, and this thing was probably one of my favorite cars I've ever ran. Now, this was one of those paint schemes when you were rolling through the pits, it seemed like every head turned your way, but it just came out super clean. To this day, that is still one of my favorite paint schemes of all time. I still have a few hoods, wings, and tails from that scheme. Unfortunately, at my first West Coast Nationals running it, it did get in an accident while leading the A-main event. That's a story for another time. We should have won that race, but at least it didn't tear it up too bad. So after the KTM car, we ended up running that for a full season without changing a paint scheme or getting a new car, and that was the 2015-2016 year. We ran 4th in points. I believe we won 3 races. That was one of our tougher years in 250. We had a lot of bad luck, and things just didn't really go our way. But the next year we came out swinging, and to start it all off, we came out with a new paint scheme. Now this car was beautiful, another one of my favorites. Now this car was modeled after Kyle Busch's NOS Energy Nationwide car, except all the orange we changed to red. At Red Bluff to this day, this is still probably my most successful car I ever ran. This was during the 2016-2017 year. We won 8 races, including 5 in a row. We won Driver of the Year, another championship. So that was the last brand new paint scheme I ran under my family-owned car owned by my dad, John Holmes, because 9 races into my rookie season at the Red Bluff Outlaws, Jimmy Elledge gave me an unbelievable opportunity to run the factory QRC house kart. Now, the picture of it is actually right there on the wall. That was just the scheme they had at the time, and there's also a picture up on the screen. You can see that's a pretty sick photo, but that was the car I ran for the remainder of my rookie season. So that was the scheme that all the house karts had on at the time. My teammate Casey McLean looked the exact same, except he had a 51 number on there. And 3 races into my last few races of my rookie season with Factory QRC, we got my first open win. And that was super, super special, and even more special to do it in that kart. Now the rest of my schemes are now all just Factory QRC house kart ones whenever we change the wrap. We usually have different wraps if we go to North Carolina for their big race, or the showcase comes around, we usually do different wraps. So the next one is when we headed to Mooresville, North Carolina for Millbridge Speedway's Speed 51 Open Challenge. And this, I just call it the simple black kart. By far one of my favorite designs because it's just so clean and simple. I didn't have a lot of good photos of it, but just the few that I had, you can tell it looks really, really nice. So I started driving for QRC in February of 2018. We had that last wrap, the simple look, in May of 2018. And in September of 2018, we got this new wrap, which I always called the black and the dark red because it was darker than the normal QRC red. We ran it at the showcase. We ran it all of last season at Red Bluff, accumulating 3 wins, including the Tyler Wolf Memorial. That was my proudest accomplishment in that paint scheme, and it was a super fun season. I was the only kart to drive for QRC that year. We ran second in the points behind Tyler Seavey. Tyler absolutely waxed us in the points, but it was still cool to come home runner-up in only our second year. So now we're moving on to not the weirdest paint scheme I've had yet in the house karts, but something that was completely different. because even dating back to about 2014 or maybe it was 2013 when Logan Seavey drove the Area 51 house cart, the cars were always black and they were always super simple, and I thought that was a clean look and almost just intimidating. And I always thought that was a great way to go with the design because it's just simple, it looks good, and it really fit Logan in the car and all that. And then up until this last showcase, we had never had a wrap on the house carts like now, which is the bright red. The bright red is something so much different, or I guess you could call it a QRC red, but it just looks really good. Like my car owner Jimmy said himself, it was time for a little bit of change and something really fun, and I think the red suits it because it is the QRC red. But overall, now that we also have 3 carts, Daniel Whitley, Landon Brooks, and myself, it really fits. Now, we don't even have a full season on these new wraps yet, and I'm really growing to love them. I love the bright red, it really pops on the racetrack, and we have 2 victories with it at the Red Bluff Outlaws so far. So those are all the wraps I've ran over the years. Sorry if that was a little bit confusing, but I really wanted to go through and show you each car that I've ran, especially since we're ending the decade, and those are all the karts that I've started my racing career with. In total, that was 12 different wraps. I tried to get through them fairly quickly, but I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoy the holiday season. Merry Christmas to everyone. And I want to end the video with this. Comment down below what your favorite paint scheme was, and maybe we should do a throwback of it if it was an older one on my family-owned car. But overall, it was just really cool to look back. I loved seeing kind of how they've changed and how maybe some of them were similar, and how the colors have been different because I had a lot of green cars and then some blue cars, and now we're on to some red cars. But anyway, I'll see you guys all in the next video at Red Bluff this weekend. We will be repping the bright red factory QRC kart. See you guys all in the next one. Deuces.